I'll be sharing my screen as well. Okay, I think we can go ahead. So welcome everybody. Today's session is around an overview of Azure and how to get started. We're going to cover some of the basic scenarios, and feel free to post any questions. We'll get to them at the end. Or you can we have a small audience, so feel free to get off mute and ask a question. So as an overview, Azure is a set of cloud services that Microsoft is providing for developers and IT pros to build applications. Now, don't get overwhelmed by this slide here, but this is just to display how big of an investment for Microsoft this is. Today, as part of the Getting Started session, we'll only be touching on a couple of these services, so I've highlighted them here. The virtual machines, functions, maybe at the end, the web apps, Azure portal, and the resource manager. Those are some of the key building blocks for Azure. If you have seen some of the other sessions that we'll be covering the rest of the week, these will be primarily around intelligence and analytics. So we have the Azure Bot Services tomorrow. We have the Azure IoT Hub on Wednesday. Thursday, we'll be doing the machine learning pieces. And on Friday, cognitive services, as you can see here. Now, most of this session is going to be around demoing inside my environment. So to give you a real feel of working with Azure. So let me switch to my portal. So there are multiple ways to access your Azure portal generally. You can go to azure.com. And on the azure.com page, you can go to the top, click portal, or directly enter portal.azure.com. That will get you into this portal. Now, as a general, the way the portal is designed is at the top you see this is the notification hub that you can access here. Any notification around resources being deployed or any alerts, they will come up right here. The gear is the settings menu. So this is where you can customize your portal. You can change the language, you can change the environment, you can change some of these. And then this is the feedback. Now I will say that Microsoft is listening to all these feedbacks and updating the portal based on all these requests that are coming in. The question mark will take you to the help and support. Now, I think here an important part to highlight is if you click on the help and support piece, you will go into this page that will give you the getting started guide, documentation, some really helpful links, how billing works, the support plans, and then here the communities that will help you, as well as any support request that you have goes here. Now I will pause here and say that generally any support that you want, the best way to go about it is to go through this portal right here. Depending on the support level, but this is where you open all these tickets and you follow up on them. You can click on the user and change some of the permissions here. Now I will navigate into the left pane. This is the main navigation. So you can collapse and expand the main navigation here. And you will see some of the menus I have. The dashboard is what you see in the middle. These are some of the services that I have. Now, if I go to scroll all the way down to the bottom, I see more services. More services going to expand another blade that includes all the services. Each one of these windows is called a blade. And I can scroll through all the list of services. We will get to that. So I'm going to start by a very simple creating a new VM. generally, to create any new resource, you start with this new button right here. This will open up what we call the Azure Marketplace. Now you see all these resources. You can either scroll down through a couple here that are grouped by recently created and popular, or you can go through the categories right here, like compute, network, storage, cognitive services, etc. Now I'm going to click on See All right here. And what I will see is once I click on See All, I will go into the Azure Marketplace, the full window. And this, you will find all of the first party, the Microsoft product, as well as some of the third party products like Citrix here, Chef, or I can say, for example, if I want a Red Hat, I can do Red Hat, and it will search by some of the, say, Linux. And you can see it says right here, publisher, these are all the publisher. It can be Red Hat, it can be any other distribution. And then it goes under the category. So I'm going to go back and to the marketplace. I'm going to click on compute. And just for this, keeping this simple scenario, I'm going to go over the Windows Server. Now, generally, I can click on this Windows Server. I will create the application. Now, let's make sure that we choose the resource manager. I'll get back to that and explain. And here you get to put in all the parameters for your deployment. Now I will call this VM demo 2017 1030 VM. And again, as I said, this is a Windows Server 2016 data center. And you can choose the VM type, the disk, SSD, or HDD. Of course, SSD is recommended for production environment. I'll go ahead and create a username and a password here. Oh, sorry. And then I get to choose the subscription. The subscription generally is one of the ways that you get, so this is how you get access into Azure. So there are 4 ways to get Azure access. One is if you have Visual Studio license, you can use the Visual Studio subscription that comes with it, and it will grant you around $100 to $150 a month that you can use. The other approach is to use an Azure Pass, and these are passes that Microsoft can provide. It will give you $100 off credit to use over 1 month. And I have some of these, so feel free to reach out after and I can provide those. The third way is to just go through the trial where you get $200 to use for 1 month, but you will need to enter your credit card, although it will not deduct anything until the end. The fourth one, which is where you should be thinking in the enterprise world, is you get a subscription assigned from the Azure administrator. So let's say from within P&G, there's an Azure administrator. He creates a set of subscriptions and he can grant you access and then you can work in that environment. It will all fall under the same Azure environment. So here I'm choosing the Visual Studio Enterprise, which is the one I have with my Visual Studio license. A resource group, I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group. So let's say demo 2017 1030. And here I get to choose the location that I want. As you see, there's a very long list. Now I'm going to go into this map to show these are all the regions where Microsoft already has Azure environments. And when we say region, does not mean one data center. Think of region as a cluster of data centers. And you can see here are all the regions. The closest to us in Singapore right now is Southeast Asia, which is actually in Singapore. You get some of the other ones. So for every resource, you get to choose where do you want to place that. Now, this is important because you want to be able to deploy resources close to the consumers of that resource. So if you're building an application, you want to put it next to the environment or the market that will be accessing it. We're going to put it Southeast Asia for now. This is to provide environments. If companies such as CNG already have Windows Server license, they can provide them here and get a discount. So I'm going to go ahead, click OK. This is the second part where I get to choose the sizing of the VM. And in this part, I can choose either by the minimum virtual CPUs and memory that I want, or I get the recommendations below, or I can go ahead and click on View All and see the list of all the sizes that I want. Now you can see here that, for example, that E8S V3, it has 8 CPUs, 64 gigabytes, 16 disk, and all of this information. And it tells you what is the estimate consumption if it's running 24/7. Now, it's a very important part. In the cloud world, you always think about how many hours is this running. So test dev should not be running all the time to save money on that. So I will go ahead and choose the D2, V3, and click select. I get to select some of the advanced functionality here. I'm going to keep the first part with the default. However, I'm going to show that there is the auto shutdown here. It is by default enabled, and I put it at 7 p.m. This is very important for your dev test environments because you want to make sure that, as I said, saving up your credits and therefore shutting down the VMs automatically at 7 every day. So I'm going to say, okay, this is the summary, and I can go ahead and validate all of my information before I can create. So I'm going to go ahead and create here. And if you see on my dashboard, the tile here is showing that it is being created. And I see in the notification, the deployment is in progress. Now, this is a good time to look at some of the environments that I have already created, as it takes a couple of minutes. Now, to access the previously created VM, I have multiple ways of doing it. One is to go through my search bar at the top and start writing the name of the VM that I want, dev environment VS 2017. You see it's a virtual machine. So I can click on that here, or I can go to virtual machines here and see my previously created VM, or I can click on the tile that's on my dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you see under the overview, we have some of the monitoring capability for the VM. I can see the CPU usage, the network, disk, and all of these things. And I can look at different timelines for each. You can see this allows you to pin this into your dashboard as well. Now, if I scroll up a little bit and I look at this top bar here, you see the first one is connect. Connect will allow you to log into this VM. Now, in the case of Windows Server, that will be an RDP connection. In the case of a Linux, that would be your SSH information that you can access here. It allows you to restart and stop, and you can see some of the information here that I have around the DNS name, public IP, the size. If I look at the left here, I will always see a couple of things. One is the auto shutdown that I had already configured. These are all the settings that I have. And then I can see the size here. It's important to mention that you can resize as you go. So I can start with a small VM. I see that it's not, the CPU usage is very high, the network is really high, everything is high. I can go ahead, click on size, and resize it as I need to. Now, normally I would click on connect and show you how to do it. In this case, I'm running my entire demo through a VM. through my dev VM. So my dev VM is actually a VM running in Azure that I use from all of my devices. So right now we are inside this dev VM, dev environment GS 2017. Okay, so if I go back to the portal and I can look at more services right here, there's something that I need to mention, and I think everybody should know and keep in mind, is that if I scroll to the compute piece, I will see that there are two different virtual machines. One is called virtual machines, one is called virtual machines classic. Now, if you recall, while creating the virtual machine, I created a new resource group. Now, this is important because, and we also chose the resource group deployment model. Now, in this new deployment model, resource group are virtual entities for multiple resources that you put together. So think of it as a container of multiple entities together. I see here the notification that it has completed, and it automatically opened it. So in a previous version of Azure, we had virtual machines that were not built under the resource model, Azure Resource Manager model, which means they did not support the resource groups. This new model allows you to see those resource groups and think of those resource groups as a group of different resources that follow the same timeline or the same life cycle. So if I go to resource groups here, and I'm going to show the new resource group that I created right now, which is demo 2017-1030. What we created was one VM, but you see all of these resources were created with it, which means that the resource group model does not see as a VM as just a single service, but it's a group of services together. And that's why this is very important. So you see here the type of each one. The second one is virtual machine. This is the storage account for my disks. This is the network interface, the public IP, and this is the rule for auto scheduling. So each one of them is a different piece that all fall within the same resource group. And you can see here, I can delete the resource group. This is important because, as I said, they should all follow the same life cycle. So if I'm creating all of them, if I'm deleting all of them. Okay, now if I look at the left-hand side, and I can scroll down and see resource costs. This is important because right now this is the new resource group. If I click on the previous resource group and I go to resource cost, you will see the cost per resource. That is very important to understand the granularity, because once you have a bulk of resources sitting in the same resource group, you want to know where is your cost going. Under that as well, I will see automation scripts. Automation script is a very important piece of when you want to talk at the enterprise scale deployments. These automation scripts are auto-generated, or I can build them myself manually. But in this case, it was auto-generated from the portal. So it looked at all the resources that are sitting in my resource group, and it allows me to extract a template. Those templates would allow you to recreate the exact same environment with the same settings again and again without having any manual errors. And you can see that you can export it into this JSON format that is here. You can CLI commands, PowerShell, .NET code if you need to do that as well as Ruby. And you can see here that you can add to your library, which will add it to this menu, or you can deploy it. So as I said, deploy multiple times the same environment. So I think this is a good segue to the second part. So as you saw here, see in my notification, the VM was created and it's ready to go. But what I want to do is show, this has been the experience from the portal. I want to show that you can interface with the portal with any any tool that you are comfortable with, whether you would like to go with the portal or you can go with PowerShell or CLI. In this case, I'm going to use PowerShell to create a new web application. And I went ahead and logged in just before we started this session, just so I don't have to put in my information. So I just logged in right here. You can see this. And it gave me information about the environment, the account, etc. Now I can go ahead and say get-azure RM. It's important that in the commands you're saying RM, because that goes back to what we're saying, the resource manager deployment. So I'm going to say Azure RM subscription. That will return the list of subscriptions that I have in my environment. I want to work with my Visual Studio Enterprise. So I'm going to go ahead and say select subscription name. I'm going to select Visual Studio. So what I will do is select the subscription that I want to work with. Now I'm inside this subscription. Close this. I'm inside this subscription. Now I can go ahead and say, okay, I want to create a new resource. I want to start with a new resource group. So I'm going to say new Azure resource group name. And give it a name, demo resource group or demo 2017. And I'm going to give it a location. And the location is going to be Southeast Asia. So my resource group was created. That's the name, location, succeeded. Now I can go ahead and create my application service plan. The application service plan is the plan that will allow you to choose the sizing for your web application. So I will go ahead and say, I will choose my resource group that I had just created. And then I will choose my location, Southeast Asia as well. And I'm going to choose a name for it. So demo 2010, 2017. Application service plan. And I'm going to choose my tier. And the tier that I'm going to choose is going to be the free one. After I go ahead and you can see I created my new environment, my new application service plan. Now I can go ahead and create my new Azure RM. And I will name it demo 2017 10.3 web app. Location, Southeast Asia as well. And I'm going to give it a resource group name. That is the same one we created earlier. Demo 2017 10.3 resource group. And I am going to what I still need to do is the set dash Azure. I will see that. Let me go to the portal, go under the resource group, the newly created one. That's the one that we just created through PowerShell. I will see here that my web application that was created. So the importance here is that you can use PowerShell to script your environment. If rather than going step by step through the portal, you can use PowerShell to create your script and just run it whenever needed. Some of the examples would include like shutting down VMs, turning on VMs at specific times, or running a series of different scripts. And you can see here that if I go into the app services I did, it has a browse that will allow you to go and browse this web app. You have the FTP information as well. That's the general way you would deploy any type of web app. It's the exact same way. It's falling under the same subscription, and I can have some monitoring information here. Now you also see on the left side there are a lot of interesting items. I will go under the scale up, scale out. Those will allow you to scale up to different pricing tiers. So get more horsepower for your web application, or you can scale it out into multiple nodes as well, and you can set up a auto scale out. Okay, so this is how you would use within PowerShell this entire script, or you can use PowerShell to call a template that's already stored in your environment. It's all the same. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my IDE to show how to create resources from within Visual Studio. That's more of Visual Studio or Eclipse both have integrations into Azure, and that would allow you to create resources, stop, build, publish, all of these services. Now, if I go to the Visual Studio environment, I start by looking at the Server Explorer because I'm logged in with my same username as my Azure. You can see that it already loaded all of my Azure information. So I loaded my environment and it loaded all the resources from within Azure. So I do not have to go out of my Visual Studio to look at what's going on in Azure. I can see it right here. So this is my dev environment. It's my demo that we just created right now and some of the other services. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. And let's say we're going to create a new web app. I'm creating a web application just like you would in any normal .NET, or as a matter of fact, you can use any other language like Python or Node.js, PHP, anything that you want, they're all supported. I'm going to be using C# for this demo, and I'm going to say demo. Okay, I'm going to say create. At this point, I'm choosing MVC. Again, this is all the normal scenario that you would do in any project. I can go ahead and hide this. Okay, so you can see it just created a basic web app that it would normally would um, in this environment. Now I'm not going to change anything. It has all the default pages, etc. All I'm going to do is actually publish this to be hosted in Azure. So what you can do is click on publish, and if you see, the integration is all inside Visual Studio. You never have to leave your environment if you're a developer building your application. So I can go ahead and click on publish right here, and you can see the integration with Azure. I can say, okay, I'm going to create a new publishing profile. And because it recognized what I'm logged in as, it automatically loaded all of my subscriptions. I'm going to leave the default name. I'm going to leave the subscription, which is my Visual Studio one. It loaded my resource groups as well if I want to work within the same resource group. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the same one that we created. And app service plan, I'm going to choose, I can either choose one of them, the previous one created, or create a new one. I'm going to go ahead and use one of the previous ones, and I'll click create. Now, what this is doing is that it's doing all the connection into Azure. This is doing all the integration into Azure, building my solution, deploying it there, creating the web application, and all the hosting that you would do. And the web app that we've been discussing is the PaaS offering, so platform as a service offering inside Azure, which means that in such scenarios, you do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. As a developer, I can just build my application and deploy it like I would on any IIS or Tomcat server, and it would just get hosted. Doesn't matter which is how it is, what's going on underneath. And so here you can see it has already deployed, and it opened up the default page that was created. So the application name, you see the URL up here, azurewebsite.net. That's just the default. Now, if I go ahead to the portal, I'm going to show what just happened. So resource groups, I'm going to go to the same one that we just created. If I click on that, I see this is the one that was created from my Visual Studio. If I click on it, again, some of the monitoring here. And then at the top, you see the URL. That is the same URL that you have here, the public URL. Now, you're going to ask, you can, I don't want this URL. Well, you can add your custom domains by scrolling on the left here. You can either buy them through here or use your own custom domain and redirect to them, and add your SSL certificates to it. The app service plan will show you information about the usage of this. So I can scale up the app service plan. And you can see here, this is the app service plan that I'm using. As I said, in this case, you do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. All you do is you publish your code. Everything is taken care of by the platform. But you have to define how many cores you want and which one of these you would like to use. So you have 1 core, 2 gigabytes of memory, 50 gigabytes of storage. This is the auto scale. It will allow you to scale out to up to 10 instances, and it does that for you based on the loads. So if I don't have that much load, it goes down. If it goes up, if there's a lot more load, then it creates more nodes, and it does that for you with the backup, etc. Now, I think so far we've covered how to use Azure from the portal itself. We've covered the PowerShell, which also would include any CLI that you're comfortable with. The Azure CLI will integrate with that. We have covered the integration with Visual Studio and how I can create my web application and publish them directly into Azure. There are other services that you can create within Visual Studio, like Azure Functions. Those are more on the serverless compute. They're more complex in this discussion, but that would also allow you to do it from within Visual Studio. Now for this piece, I'm going to go ahead and create a database, and I'm going to go to New. I'm going to go under Databases. For this specific scenario, I'm just going to go with a SQL database. As well, this is part of the Platform as a Service offering, which means that you do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure of it. You can use any other type of database, like NoSQL or anything else. For this, we're going to use the SQL database. Give it a name. I'm going to choose the same. I'm going to choose the same resource group as we created earlier. And the source here, I can generally, you would choose a blank database if you're starting from scratch, or a backup if you've already built it somewhere, you have the back file and you just want to restore it. Or if it's just for testing, for playing around, you want to test out like Power BI things on top of it, or you want to test out other resources, you can use the sample database that has a couple of tables that you can use. For this, I'm just going to keep the blank database. And under server here, I can go ahead and create a new server. Now, I said earlier that you do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. And how come I have this server here? This server here is more of a logical grouping of multiple databases for just to avoid having multiple username and passwords for each one of them as you access them. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new server. I'm going to call this and then under server admin login, for users of the SQL Server databases engine, this is like the SA login. So let's say see, this username and password is going to be used across multiple databases. That's why you would create multiple ones and group them. You still do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. Okay, and then the pricing tier, this is where we go into the pricing tier for databases. For the databases, the concept of DTUs is what is used to understand the sizing. DTUs is database throughput unit. It's a combination of the core, of the number of cores, of the memory, and the I/O ops, the disk speed. All of these together, they go into the DTU. You can have more information if you go in here, and I can select which one I want generally based on the sizing that you want. And you can always scale up the database tier without any downtime when you're working with SQL databases. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. And the platform is going to take care of everything for me. I will just have it, you can see here, it's downloading, it's deploying. And then once this is deployed, I can use this database for anything like I would generally. So I'm going to go through SQL Server Management Studio that we generally use for any SQL Server environment, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. I'm going to click on Connect. And you see here, the server name, if you're working with local databases, you would put in the local name here. But in this case, we're working with Azure databases. So I can go ahead and use one of my previously created databases. And I go to Demo SQL DB. And you see here server name. That's the one I will copy at the top, open it here, paste it. And then SQL Server authentication, as I said, and this is the username and password that I put in earlier. So I'm going to go with this password. So it's just like you would do it with a database that is sitting on-prem, except you do not have to worry about scaling, about replication, or about anything. It's all taken care of for you. And this is my demo SQL DB with, I can look at all the databases, all the database environment like you would generally, like the tables and everything else. I can navigate from within my SQL Server Management Studio. And you can see here, so for example, I'm looking at this previously created database. You can see, oh, there you go, it finished the previous one. I'm going to stay on this one. As part of the monitoring, you can see here the DTU, and this will give you an understanding of the usage so far and the size of the database. So this information will allow you to understand if you need to scale up to support more DTUs or a bigger size environment. This is a very important piece. And you can get some of the other information from the connection strings right here. Now, I think we have completed a very basic view of all the different services and the ways you can interact with Azure. A great way to go and find any further information is to go to the azure.com portal. If you go to the azure.com portal, you can see you can go under products here. You will have the list of all products by the group. So I want to look at cognitive services, etc. I can see each one of them that I want, and I can click on it and have more information about that service. Now, in any application that you're using, you're never going to use a single product. Like one single app service is not going to work. You always need multiple ones. And that's why if you go under solutions, you will see that for some of the solutions that always repeat themselves, we have created solution samples here that you can go into. So let's say I will go into the digital marketing one. If I click on that, you can see some of the use cases, some of the case studies that were done using that. Get some information here. And then if I keep scrolling down, it will tell you the list of services that go into such a solution to build it. And then you can find some of the partners that have built solutions on this and some of the architecture that you can use as a baseline. So this is the reference architecture here for some of these case studies. Now this is interesting. As I scrolled here, you saw some of these partners. If I go to Marketplace, if you go to Marketplace, you will see here the full list of Marketplace items that I had showed earlier whenever you want to add. And I can search by anything, Red Hat, or anything we want. And it's interesting to see that some of them will have the test drive right here, where you can test those solutions that the third-party companies like Chef Software here, CloudBees, have built. So you can test it for a period of time. Or you can just deploy it in your environment with this Get It Now. Some of the interesting things are like this data science virtual machine. So Microsoft has built a number of virtual machines where you would have, like this one is Ubuntu, we have the other one are Windows Server, where you would have software pre-installed for this environment. So you see here in the data science, I can see all the list of software that's already installed. That way I can just create this and get going. I don't need to reinstall everything. So that is under the Marketplace. Under the Training tab, you'll find some of the free online training courses. You can see some of those and some of the learning paths. this is very interesting to see the different courses that we will give you, the different resources one after the other, and then you can go about that. So AI developer on Azure, it starts from, there are multiple ones you can see. It will have a beginner course, an intermediate course, and an advanced course. So always starting with the basic, and then you can build up on top of that. And it will tell you how much time it will take for each one. I can also go to the documentation here, and you'll find a lot of very good documentation. One of the good things here is around if you're building your command line commands here, you can look at the documentation. And I think we can switch back to the deck here before we jump into questions. So we didn't have time to cover the functions piece, but if you see in this big services, what we've covered was the Azure portal, the Azure Resource Manager, and how it works with the resource groups. Web apps, we've deployed 2 web applications that will also use for just web APIs or any mobile APIs. And then you have virtual machines that we have used as well. There are all of these other services that can be, that you can go into details. We have covered the demos and quick summary of what we've done. So we covered the Azure portal and managed resources. We created PowerShell script, and that can be used for automating, as I said, whether writing the full script or using the resource manager scripts. You can deploy from within your IDE, so we showed within Visual Studio, and then you can get a lot more information within Azure.com. There are 4 more webinars that I think would be interesting for you. Starting tomorrow, there's Alyssa's going to be covering at 4 p.m. The bot framework, the IoT will be covered by Tam on Wednesday. Crit will be covering machine learning and some of these. And an important thing to highlight is that we have created this group from within employees, within Microsoft team for P&G employees. So if you have any follow-up questions, you're trying out things, you want access, all of these things, send an email to this email address and somebody will help you with whatever you need. Generally, technical questions, best way to have them answered is to send them here. With that, I left 10 minutes or so for any questions. So if anybody has a question, feel free to write it in the IM or just get off mute. Or any feedback. Or nobody was hearing me. Does it work now? You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, we can unmute now.
Yes.
Mark? Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Upitan.
Sorry, I have a very, very fundamental question. The resource groups that you were talking about, I'm a little confused on what those are and how we're supposed to. I understand the setup and everything, but I don't really understand what they are.
Okay, so the resource group is a logical grouping of multiple resources together. Now you would put in the same resource group, multiple resources that are part of the same life cycle. So I have my dev environment, I can put some of this stuff there together. Now the resource group are not a physical separation. So if you put in a VM in one resource group and you put in a VM in another resource group, they can still communicate. There is no problem there. It's just the logical grouping of resources that you would create together, put in the same template, delete together, etc.
Resource is all is everything including the VM, the database and everything
Correct.
related to that one web app, for
Correct.
example.
Every single item is called a resource. So whether it is an application or it's just a network card, those are all resources.
Can one resource be allocated to two different resource groups, or is that one by one-on-one relation?
No, every resource goes into one resource group, yes.
Okay.
But as I said, you can always communicate in between resource groups. There is no limitation there.
It's just a way of organizing, I guess.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Sudhanshu, go ahead.
No worries. Thank you so much. I think I just had one question on in terms of if we are developing any application within PNG globally, and we have some question. Is this the same email we can reach out to anywhere in the world?
Yes, this is going to be supported by a group of people for PNG. So any questions that you're trying Azure, just ask questions here.
Okay, fantastic.
This is for the learning piece. This is not your support email. Just making sure.
Okay. Fantastic.
Any other questions?
Hey, Mark, this is Kelly here. Can we develop offline and then upload a VM to the Azure cloud, or is it really hard to do that?
No, you can do that. So let me go back to azure.com. You can migrate VMs that you already have in your environment. So if I go under resources, if I scroll down, downloads, you'll see here some of the tools that you can use. So here, this is the command line tools. But under migration, you see virtual machine readiness assessment or virtual machine assessment. There is one for the migration that will allow migration existing onto Azure. So there are tools that would allow you to migrate existing VMs into Azure. Another one would be, just off the top of my mind, is if you go under enterprise integration. No, actually. Site recovery. You can use Azure Site Recovery to migrate databases from one environment to the other. And if you do it within 30 days, then the service is free.
Awesome.
Says here. Yeah. As I said, if you are right now just curious in trying out things, just shoot me an email or to this email address. If you're a PNG employee, if you are part of the hackathon, you can go through the Slack channel that's already out there, and I can provide passes that would allow you to use $100 for 1 month, and you can just try out your environment. And definitely encourage you to join all the other webinars. They're going to go much deeper into these scenarios. All set? Other questions? Anything you would like to look at, or we might have missed in the this session or the other sessions? Okay, then I guess if there are no more questions, you can always send the email, as I said, to PG Azure Learning Service.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, Mark, I had a question. I was on mute. I was saying maybe a non-Microsoft question, but in terms of integration of Azure into Alexa, how do you integrate that? Because they rely on Lambda as the backend. But if you were to use Azure as the backend for Alexa, how do you do that?
So the way you would do that is Alexa just communicates with serverless functions. So rather than building it on Lambda, which is the default one that's used by AWS, you can use what we have here under compute that's called functions. It is a similar application. It's running on Azure, allows it to serverless code that you run in here, and then it would be called by the LX app. Similar for Cortana that's coming out. It's part of already Windows 10. You would use this as your backend. So it doesn't matter the endpoint. This would be your backend.
Got it.
Okay. Well, as I said, feel free to send emails, and we're here to help out. Give you back 2 minutes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. Bye.